Okay, well, welcome everyone to the February 28th Watershed Planning Commission meeting. I will call this meeting to order. First, we'll need to have an approval of the agenda and meeting minutes, and I understand that there are a few changes to the agenda today.
Yes, Madam Chair. Let me share the package here. Okay, can everyone see the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, so under ongoing business, we'll keep the McMahon Lake outlet because we do have an update for that, but if we'll add a D under ongoing business, and that should be titled McMahon Lake Outlet Engineering Services Recommendation.
Okay.
And that'll be an action item. And then under new business, A, the Curly Leaf vendor proposals will be an action item. And new business C, the Jordan ordinance amendments will be an action item.
Okay. All right, do we have a motion to approve the agenda with those changes?
Madam Chair, this is Virgil. I move to approve as amended.
Do we have a second?
And this is Pam Casilius. I'll second.
Thank you. And Melissa, would you like to call roll?
Yes, Commissioner Weaver,
Aye.
Commissioner Print,
Aye.
Commissioner Casilius,
Aye.
and Commissioner Schmidt.
Aye.
Right, the motion is passed. And now we will take a look at the meeting minutes. Do we have any suggestions for changes to the meeting minutes, or do we have a motion to pass the meeting or approve the meeting minutes as presented?
Commissioner Schmidt here. I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
And do we have a second?
Commissioner Beerling, I'll second that.
All right.
Sorry,
Melissa,
Commissioner.
you're up.
I didn't see that you came on. Apologize for that. Yes, Commissioner Weaver,
Aye.
Commissioner Pint,
Aye.
Commissioner Casilius,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Aye.
and Commissioner Beerling.
Aye.
Great, that motion is passed. We can move on to staff reports, and I understand that Troy is out tonight, and it sounds like his report is in the packet. Is there anything to add to that, Melissa or Vanessa?
Just that if you have any questions on the packet, you're welcome to contact Troy directly.
Perfect, thank you. Then we can move on to the WMO report. Vanessa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My first update is a little anecdotal. I take some phenology data every year, and I have for a number of years. And today I heard my first wood frog calling. And this is easily a good 3 weeks before the first wood frog call I've heard in previous probably 8 years. So happy spring. That's one of my earliest signs of spring I've ever seen. And it's still February, technically. So that's my first update. Second update is the McMahon Lake Improvement District is moving forward in the process. As you may or may not be aware, part of the project to install the lake outlet for McMahon involves the creation of a lake improvement district so that somebody is there to be responsible for maintaining and owning that outlet. As you folks know, owning lake outlets is not in the policy goals or priorities of the SWMO, nor is it in the goals or policy of the county. We do, however, fully support coordinating these types of activities when they're heavily supported by the residents. And we are very supportive in our goals and plans of helping to, coordinate, implement, and help manage those projects. But that being said, again, they still need an owner. And so the Lake Improvement District is working heavily to be formed by the residents of McMahon Lake in order to take on that maintenance responsibility, which will likely be very low long-term, but it still needs a home. It's actually been lots of great conversation, some misunderstandings a little bit, but we've had a lot of follow-up conversations with different residents, with the county and the township, and worked a lot of those out. There was a public hearing on February 15th. A lot of the kind of concerns were that they, wanted to talk more about who was being included in the Lake Improvement District and who wasn't. For those of you who follow Lake Improvement Districts, it's the residents that brought the petition to the county, and so the county has to look at that petition and determine whether that's reasonable and fits within statute and will meet those goals. But obviously there are always people on all sides that have questions still or thoughts on that. So there is a lot of great conversation and some follow-up questions that we decided we really wanted to get to the bottom of, and so we've been working on that. And then just some additional questions about, water quality and aquatic invasive species being two of the other goals of this Lake Improvement District. And from the WMO's perspective, that's very important because in order to permit this project, the DNR needs to know who is going to be accountable for the discharge, because this is not a previous existing water connection. So this is a new drainage area and a new drainage connection to downstream wetlands and Sand Creek. And we also know McMahon has both Crowley's pondweed and Eurasian water bilfoil. So while the outlet will have a filter on it, the DNR still needs to know ahead of time who's identified to ensure that there will be no discharge of AIS or highly impaired waters into those downstream water bodies. So part of that is just connecting that responsibility also to the lid, who's responsible for the outlet, and then maintaining that. So just added some more clarification as to why that was there. Not that the lid was going to start doing things that the county or WMO plans to do, but mostly just to kind of start tying those maintenance activities together and just making it easier on everybody. Those were, some of the biggest questions. Overall, the lid was very well supported overall, but just a couple of areas of concern and deeper detail wanted. So that's been a pretty hot and heavy activity. The board will be making a decision on the lid on March 15th. It'll be brought to the board for action on the March 15th meeting. And so that's what I have on that one. And I apologize, Melissa, is Commissioner Wolf here today?
Yes, he's on.
I wasn't sure. If Commissioner Wolf, you had anything you wanted to add to that? About
No,
McMahon
that-
lid or any thoughts?
That about does it. I can't wait till it's all done and we got it all set up and get that outlet going, because it's been, I think it's been 3 or 4 or 5 years. So thank you.
Yep. Okay. So those are the big updates that I have at the moment, and I stand for any questions.
Thanks, Vanessa. Any questions for Vanessa? Okay, hearing none, we can move into ongoing business. First is project updates, and I understand Ryan is also out tonight. So Vanessa, you'll be covering that.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Yes, I'll just be reviewing some of Ryan's updates. So we did discuss these prior to him not being here this evening. And he has a few quick ones that you're familiar with. First of all, the CIP maintenance of our phase 1 site, that one's been something that's on the top of our list, has a little bit of erosion and undercutting going on there, especially near that outlet. So he's continuing to work with the Public Works Department on fixing that site. It's been a little tricky getting together with them because obviously they have a lot of winter maintenance activities themselves, and they don't just have a crew hanging out to do watershed maintenance and that type of thing. But I think he's pretty hopeful next week he's going to be able to connect with them. Our window is closing, obviously, with the coming of spring to get that done. So otherwise we'll have to wait probably another year until it freezes again. 2021 Watershed-based implementation funding reporting. Our first reporting period for our grant was completed before the deadline of February 1st. Because we've had a lot of ongoing conversations with Bowser about reporting. We did spend a lot of extra time working with them to submit our information ahead of time. It was like pre-reporting submission and have them take a look at it before formally submitting it. So we're hoping that alleviates any hiccups and so on. Also, the 9 Elements grant reporting, as you know, this is a reporting season. So the first reporting period for our grant was completed again before the deadline of January 30th. Our current representative at PCA has been promoted, so we will likely be assigned a new representative as our day-to-day contact in the future. We'll miss Jordan. He did express that he has very much enjoyed working with us and that we are one of the better reportees that he has had and always been a pleasure to work with. So hopefully we get to work with him in his new capacity at some point. So new CIP outreach. Ryan will be reaching out to a lot of landowners coming up here pretty soon, where new CIPs have been identified in the next month or so to help gauge their interest levels. The technical assistance and cost share program outreach will continue to reach out to those landowners outside of Sand Creek Watershed to generate interest in the tax program with focus on encumbering projects towards the 2019 watershed-based funding grant. So we're doing a little bit of extra foot on the groundwork ourselves. We usually use just the SWCD, but we've got some grant funds that we really need to get spent. So we're going to put a little bit of extra effort into that. Our macroinvertebrate monitoring, and that for this year, he's just getting into identifying a couple of new monitoring sites on Raven Stream and Porter Creek for monitoring in future years. So hopefully that would bring our total, we can get our total up to about 4 monitoring sites this year. And then his results for the 2021 monitoring efforts should be available soon. And that'll start allowing us to have a baseline of the biological condition of our creeks, which in conjunction to the water quality parameters and data will help us get a better overall ecological health grade on our creeks and rivers in the watershed. So Markley Lake Engineering Consultant request for proposal is currently out for proposal with a due date later in March and decision on which firm to go with to follow thereafter. Again, this is a project we're coordinating with, in conjunction with the City of Prior Lake and the City of Credit River, just to do a study on the drainage shed of Markley and determine if there's a best path forward to alleviate some of the flooding. So the outcome of this, again, is a study or a report to identify some best paths for moving forward on that. And then finally, the SWCD service agreement currently under review by our legal department and RBA is scheduled to go to the board in March. As you folks may or may not remember, we usually had an annual service agreement with the SWCD outlining the activities we hope to achieve this year with them, and then obviously some costs and financial breakdowns. We had a little bit of a break because Bowser wanted to review it and had some questions, but never really quite got back to us, let's just say that. And we still feel it's a useful agreement to have, and so we would like to continue to move forward with it and use it again in the oncoming years. So, and with that, I stand for any questions on behalf of Ryan.
Madam Chair and Vanessa, this is Virgil. Sorry to plead ignorant here again, but I can't remember the very first item of the CIP maintenance. Can you refresh me in where is the phase 1 site that we're referring to?
The phase 1 site, that I can't show you on my map. The phase 1 site is along Sand Creek, and I apologize. I'll have to mail it out to you. I don't know if I could really describe it very well, and that's.
But it's one we looked at, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's starting to undercut a little bit at the one.
So I just don't remember if that was the one that was by where Porter comes in, or is it the one where they had to bring a road in from off of 21?
It's the one where we had to bring a little bit of a road in off of 21.
Okay,
it's
now I know
little bit over.
Yeah, I know which one it is.
Yeah, okay. I was gonna say it's a little bit overgrown. We could still get equipment down in there, but basically it's starting to erode around the riprap, and it could just slump and fail, and that might not necessarily be the end of the world. But if we can get in there and do a little fixing ourselves, that would probably prevent a little bit more sediment from getting into the creek. Either way, it'll stabilize, but
Yep,
we
no,
still
I
like to get the
remember the site
maintenance
now.
done.
Thanks. I'll take a look at it when I get a chance. Thanks.
Thanks.
Other questions for
Any
Vanessa?
other?
Okay, then I think we can move on to the project updates from Melissa on McMahon Lake outlet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Vanessa covered quite a bit with McMahon. I'll just add that there is an item on today's agenda that has to do with the project, which is a recommendation to approve moving forward with one of the consultants that we've received proposals from. The other update that I would have for you is that we did have our Scott Clean Water Education Program 2022 kickoff meeting last week. And I just wanted to quickly share with you some of the priorities that are going to be focused on for 2022. Just as a reminder, there's 3 different audiences that we focus on: agricultural and rural landowners. The priority items for this year will be soil health and regenerative agriculture to continue with that outreach, groundwater protection, runoff reduction, and nutrient management. The second group would be community groups and schools and government. And there's quite a few different things focusing on youth education expansion, recycling education, enhancing local leader engagement and support, native landscaping and public spaces, and again with chloride reduction and outreach to maintenance professionals. And then the urban and lakeshore resident audience, which would be increased awareness of homeowner salt reduction via water softeners and alternatives to that. Promotion of residential pollinator plantings, and then responsible pet waste management, and then natural landscaping and stormwater runoff responsibilities. So just thought it'd be nice to share some of those priorities with you for what we're focusing on for education and outreach. And I did try to look up really quickly the phase 1 site, and I couldn't find it fast enough. So Vanessa, was there anything you wanted to add about the SCHP budget or anything, or?
Actually, that's a good point, Melissa. Thank you for bringing that up. One of the pieces of conversation that we have been having with the SWCB, and the SWCB did bring it to the partners this year for further discussion, is that the SWMO just simply cannot afford to fund about 90% or more of the Scott Clean Water Education Partnership, not because we don't want to, not because we don't think it's a valuable endeavor, but simply because we don't have the budget to do so. So in the past, for the past several years, as partners started to kind of wane from their financial contribution, the WMO has just simply stepped up and covered the difference. But that has led to, roughly about $100,000 or more each year going towards Clean Water Education Partnership. At the same time, we don't have, necessarily multi-million-dollar grants to offset that cost in our budget. So with our grants being in the, the more modest hundreds of thousands of dollars, we no longer can really dedicate that level. And so we did bring that concern to the conservation district because, we just simply can't fund it like we used to. And we wanted to bring that back to the partners. So we did have a good discussion about how we can move forward with SCHP. Some of the recommendations that I did ask us to talk about was instead of maybe waiting until the year was over and budgets were set for the following year, and then kind of looking at what everybody was able to toss in and then setting a work plan based upon that, we'd be a little bit more proactive and align it with our current budgeting process. so that the partnership would actually meet in July or August to identify those priorities and budgets. And then the partners would contribute based upon those goals that everybody agreed upon. And then we could work that into our budgets ahead of time. And then the other piece was identifying kind of a cost breakdown, either based upon population or tax base or some combination thereof, to help determine what is kind of an equitable way to allow each partner to kind of contribute a little bit more balanced. And so, again, the partners were really open to doing that and would really just like to hear more about that. So we're going to bring that to each of the partners here in the next few months, which is to draft, again, kind of a partnership kind of agreement and financial structure. So that was just another larger piece of the SWEP program meeting this year. And that's just simply because we're very, very supportive of it. We just simply can't fund 90 to 100% almost of the program ongoing. It's not sustainable, and we want it to be successful. So.
Okay, thanks for that additional background too. Any other questions for Vanessa? Okay, we can move on to the One Watershed, One Plan update, and I believe we just decided to add this as a standing agenda item. So Commissioner Pint and myself could give you an update on how that is going. We have not had a meeting since the last time we met. I thought we actually did in February, and it turns out that meeting is in March. So in my understanding is that March meeting, oh, I didn't even get this far in the agenda. Thank you for coming down to this. Oh no, this is the McMahon Lake outlet. I thought this was going to be for the watershed planning.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was like, oh, I didn't realize we had gotten, because I know they were planning on going out and checking with consultants to do the One Watershed, One Plan. And my understanding was at the March meeting, they were going to come back with those proposals so they could be discussed. I don't think I have anything else to update. Commissioner Pint, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, that's fine. I think, but maybe by the next meeting, we should have maybe a little bit more information for everybody. So thanks.
Yes. Yep. Okay, so then I think we'll just move on to the agenda item that was added, which was this engineering services recommendation for the McMahon outlet. Melissa, do you want to go over that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So in August of last year, the WMO sent out requests for proposals to several different qualified firms for engineering design services for the McMahon Lake outlet. We did receive 2 proposals, one from WSB and Associates and one from SRF Consulting Group. A committee of myself, Megan Tosca, our engineer, and Vanessa did review the proposals. Basically for the project approach, the cost, the project manager and the project team. And cost estimates are provided here in the memo that you can see. Tasks 1 through 9 are the main tasks needed to complete a design for the outlet. We did ask for an additional separate quote for possible future observation or construction observation support, which is the separate amount here. And as you can see what the totals are. So based on the committee's review, staff recommends selecting WSB. Staff is familiar with the project manager for WSB and the project team and feels comfortable that they'll do a very good job. They do have quite a bit of experience designing outlets for different water bodies. What else did I say? So overall, they were the low cost proposal. So we're seeking a recommendation awarding a contract for the engineering design services for McMahon Lake outlet to WSB and Associates. And this item is scheduled for the March 1st county board meeting. And I'll stand for any questions.
I don't have any questions. I'm surprised at the cost difference.
This is Pam. I was just going to say the same thing. I just wondered what accounts for such a difference between the two companies. I don't question their capabilities. I'm just, that is sort of surprising to me.
Some of the differences that I remember from the proposals were SRF did propose more soil borings in the geotechnical work. And it really depends on, you know, what their fees are per staff working on things. I can't remember off the top of my head what else. Vanessa, do you remember where some of the cost differences came from? I just remember they did propose more soil borings, and I can't remember where else the additional cost came from.
You know, kind of overall, item by item, there wasn't one specific area other than, like Moses said, soil borings where there was a notable difference. And the reason why part of the soil borings for SRF were higher and additional was because they were proposing some additional soil boring downstream of the outlet, a little bit more further downstream for the proposed outlet channel, which is just a different approach than WSB, which was focusing more on just the outlet installation area. And so part of that has to do a little bit with how each one approached the scope. You know, through our discussion, I would probably candidly say, I think probably SRF spent a little bit more time looking at our needs and probably detailed that a little bit more thoroughly. And that's probably what accounted for much higher of the cost that was kind of reflected in what I saw. And so we had a lot more follow-up questions with WSB and a little bit of adjustment there as well in the bid. But overall, after talking with WSB, I think we'll still get what we need from them. And so I would say the biggest difference was probably just kind of attention to overall detail and needs between the two initial quotes, and then going back and talking with each of the different bidders to determine what they could actually provide us in service and what would actually meet our needs. And that's how we ended up arriving back at WSB.
Yeah, the other thing I
And
do remember
Vanessa,
is,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Is this all county funded?
That is an excellent question, Commissioner Casilius. So this is actually part of the larger McMahon Outlet Grant project. And the WMO and county have about $300,000 out of our levy funds to contribute towards this project. So this specific activity actually comes out of the WMO's approved budget dedication of $100,000. So while we are still working on, the county is still working on some of the grant signature details, this would actually be part of the WMO's levy match towards that overall project.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, one thing I do remember now is that they did put in their proposal a lot more check-in meetings to stay on track with project management. So that was another increase in cost.
Okay, first, any other comments or questions? I believe you'll be looking for a motion to approve and have this go to the board so they can hire the engineering firm.
Correct. Yeah, a recommendation to approve WSB, to enter into a contract with WSB.
Thank you, Melissa. Do we have a motion to recommend going into contract with WSB? That the board go into contract with WSB?
Madam Chair, this is Virgil. I would make a motion to recommend that we ask the staff to put together a request for a contract with WSB and Associates as presented to us today.
And do we have a second?
Commissioner Beerling, I'll second that.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Weaver,
Aye.
Commissioner Pint,
Aye.
Commissioner Casilius,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Aye.
and Commissioner Veerling.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great, the motion is passed. Okay, then I think we can move on to new business. First, we have the curly leaf treatment vendor proposals, Melissa.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So in your packet was another memo. So in early January, I sent out requests for proposals to 12 different qualified commercial applicators for curly leaf treatments on Cedar, McMahon, O'Dowd, and Thole. We only had one proposal turned in by the deadline, and that was from PLM Lake and Land Management. We've been contracting with PLM since 2012. They've done really good work for us. They do also follow, and Vanessa, let me know if I'm stating this right. So there's state pricing. I believe it's the SWIFT vendor. So they are a SWIFT vendor with the county where they have to follow state pricing on their products or services. So basically there's a maximum amount that they can charge us. And I believe the county wants to work more with vendors or contractors that have that SWIFT vendor number. So I just want to make sure that you knew that. So you can see in the memo that I put together a table of what the costs were, and we asked them for pricing on 2 different chemicals, Aquathol K and Tribune, or Diquat as it's called. I'll get back to Cedar in just a moment, but for McMahon, O'Dowd, and Thole, the pricing is pretty reasonable considering the Tribune is a less expensive chemical, but you can only treat up to 150 acres with that particular chemical. You can't treat more acreage with that. And there's reasonings behind that, but I would have to refer back to PLM to understand what those are again. I know that it does kill more than just curly leaf. So we want to be careful how much of it we use. With Cedar, at the survey, at the late summer survey last year, I did find a lot more curly leaf in the south end of the lake. And last year also, the DNR only allowed 103 acres to be treated because for the 2 years previous to that, we were using a chemical called Floridone that basically kills everything in the lake. And I think the lake residents really liked it because there was no curly leaf, but it also was affecting natives. And that was very apparent in when we completed our reports at the end of each year. So the DNR was very cautious last year and only allowed up to 103 acres to be treated. So in this proposal, how I calculated this amount is I calculated what the pricing was from PLM up to 200 acres of Aquathol treatments on Cedar, and I believe up to 150 with Tribune for a 3-year total. And that's how I got this total. Now the DNR might not allow us to treat 200 or 300 acres on Cedar. I was just looking for a maximum to put into the 3-year contract to make sure that we didn't go over the contract total. So that's why this looks like a really large number, but it's very possible that they won't let us treat that many acres. And it also depends on how much the Lake Improvement District has for funding, because in our plan, the WMO only contributes $25,000 to curly leaf treatment for Cedar Lake. So we do have a maximum each year. So I did go over the proposals with the Cedar Lake Improvement District, a couple of representatives, and with the O'Dowd and Thole Lake Association, who were comfortable again with PLM and did recommend contracting with PLM. So Hopefully I clearly explained how I came up with this 3-year contract total. If not, let me know. So based on both committees' reviews, we recommend selecting PLM for another 3-year contract, so 2022 through 2024, for curly leaf treatments on Cedar, McMahon, O'Dowd, and Thole Lakes. And I do have an RBA for the March 15th board for this approval by the county board. So staff is looking for a recommendation to enter into a 3-year contract with PLM Lakeland Management for curly leaf treatments for Cedar, McMahon, O'Dowd, and Thole for 2022 through 2024. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Madam Chair and Melissa, this is Virgil. Yes, I do have a question, and it's actually a concern. I'm concerned because we've done a fair amount of treating on Cedar already, obviously, and I'm concerned of why we'd want to increase the acreage per year of treatment beyond the 100, like you have at Thole and O'Dowd and McMahon, you have using the Tribune chemical, whereas on Cedar, you're thinking we should use the Aquathol and the Tribune. So, and because of additional costs, et cetera, I'm concerned as to why we would want to treat such a large portion per year.
That's a great question, Commissioner Pent. And the answer is there's still a lot of curly leaf in the lake. The lake was growing curly leaf for decades before we even started any kind of a treatment. Managing the curly leaf is in the TMDL implementation plan for Cedar and McMahon Lakes. That's one of the action items that we're taking to try to reduce the nutrient levels in the lake. We have a partner in the Cedar Lake Improvement District who does provide matching funds and sometimes above matching funds to the treatments. But there's still, as we saw in the late season survey of 2021, there's still a lot of curly leaf growing in the lake. And again, the number of acres that we treat is dependent on what the DNR will allow. So if the DNR says for the next 3 years, nope, we're only going to let you continue to treat 100 acres, then we would use the Tribune, which is the least expensive chemical. If they were to allow us to treat up to 200, then it would make more sense to use the Aquasol, which would be, it's more expensive than the Tribune, about double, but that's the chemical that you would need to use to treat larger areas. And again, the WMO only contributes $25,000 to the treatments on Cedar Lake, so we do have a max. But if we stop managing for curly leaf on Cedar, it's likely we could see nutrient levels go back up. We have seen small improvements in Cedar Lake. Again, it's a little bit more challenging lake because curly leaf was left untouched for decades. So we knew going into this, it was probably going to take a little bit longer than some of the other lakes to manage. And that will be reevaluated when we do our next plan update. But at least in our current watershed plan through 2026, we do have in there to continue to manage curly leaf on Cedar and the other lakes as long as there's willing partners. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. So just to summarize, I want to make sure I understood correctly that regardless of what happens in terms of DNR's approval, our maximum exposure would still only be $25,000 per year for Cedar Lake.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, you've answered my questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Melissa? Okay, do we have a motion that we recommend that the board enter into a 3-year contract with PLM for curly leaf treatment for these 4 lakes, excuse me.
This is Commissioner Casilius. I make a motion that the WMO enters into a 3-year contract with PLM for Curly Leaf Pond weed treatment.
We have a second?
Commissioner Vierling, I'll second that.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Veerling,
Aye.
Commissioner Weaver,
Aye.
Commissioner Pint,
Aye.
Commissioner Casilius,
Aye.
and Commissioner Schmidt.
Aye.
Okay, motion is passed. We can move on to the wakeboard boat U of M study, Melissa.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. I'm just going to get to my notes here. So this is just an informational item. We had talked about wakeboard boats and what studies were out there. I think it was in 2020, maybe I brought that to you. Just wanted to let you know that the St. Anthony Falls Laboratory has completed their first study on wakeboard boats. The full report is available at the link that I provided on the PDF. Just really quickly, just some summary of what they found. In the study, they looked at 4 different recreational watercraft. 2 of them were your typical recreational watercraft that you use for like cruising or water skiing or tubing, and represent boats that have been on Minnesota lakes for many decades. They also studied 2 other wake surfing boats that are newer to Minnesota waters. So this report discusses the waves produced by those boats, including the wave heights and the energy within the waves and how that changes with the distance from the boat. So some of the findings, and I'm just going to list a few so you can read the full report to get a lot more detail in there. It's very detailed. Some of the kind of general findings that they found was that when operated under their most typical operating conditions, wake surf boats were capable of producing larger wake waves that contain more energy and power than non-wake surf boats. And I think we found that in those other studies that I had mentioned the first time that this was brought to you. Under that comparison, the 2 wake surf boats produced substantially higher, like approximately 2 to 3 times higher maximum wave heights than the non-wake surf boats at 100 foot of operational distance, and about 2 times higher waves after 600 feet of an operational distance. They also tested on a non-wake surf boat an aftermarket attachment. It's called a wave shaper. So that was on one of the non-wake surf boats, and they found that that aftermarket product had measurable impact on wave characteristics, resulting in increased maximum wave height, total wave energy, and wave power. So that suggests that aftermarket products installed on non-wake surfing boats can create waves similar to wake surfing boats. They also found that in general, all boats followed the same decrease in maximum wave height and wave power with increasing operational distance. So the longer they drove the boat along the water, the wave height and power kind of went down. So that's about all I wanted to share with you. I just wanted you to know that that first study is done. Their next study, if they find enough funding support, is going to look at the interaction of waves with lake bottoms and stirring up of the lake bottoms and aquatic vegetation and shorelines. So this is just one of probably a few different reports that they're going to look at with wake boats. So again, the full report is available for you to read at your leisure. I have not had time to read the full report myself, but Just wanted to make sure you had access to it, so. That's all I had.
Did they say in the study if they use scale models or if they were actually out using real boats?
They were actually using real boats. They actually have what type of boat it was, quite a bit of detail in the report about each boat,
Okay,
the actual name and style model of the boat. Yeah, that's all in there.
I think that's the internship I want next summer.
You know, this is Commissioner Casilius. I just wanted to also add, and hopefully they'll maybe address this in further studies, but on Cedar Lake, for example, you know, the lake level was extremely low this summer. And the wake boats in particular, when they were trying to get the boats off the lake, the sort of the engine wash, if you will, of those boats created some rather deep holes on the landings, and some people that were just trying to take their regular boats in and out were really struggling to get trailers in and out because of those holes that those wake boats have done damage to the kind of the landing sites. So that's another concern in addition to just the waves itself.
Yeah, that's a good point, Commissioner Casilius. And that does occur on O'Dowd Lake quite a bit. It's called power loading, where they use their motors to push the boat up onto their trailer. And so that's been an issue on O'Dowd Lake as well. In fact, the DNR actually had signs out on the dock last year that if people continue to power load, they will close down that access. Because they had to actually get out there and repair the hole. There was quite a large hole at the O'Dowd Lake access. So, yeah.
Other questions or comments for Melissa? Okay, then I think we can move into the Jordan ordinance amendments. Melissa.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So in your packet is a memo detailing the timeline of receiving the Jordan's draft ordinance amendments. So that was in late January. We received those from their consultant from Bolton and Mink. And that was basically just on section 153.11, which is their stormwater requirements. After review of those, it was brought to our attention by environmental health staff who was reviewing an EAW, environmental assessment worksheet, that the city's bluff setback was not equivalent to the WMO's bluff standards. Their setback was much less than what we require. So in a response letter, I did reference a section in Minnesota Statute 103B that requires the city to have their ordinance in compliance with our WMO plan, which our standards are part of our plan. Just to remind them that, because we had also heard they were giving a little pushback to our environmental health department about that setback. But they are required to be in compliance with our standards. So after they received my letter, they did agree that they would bring their bluff standard into compliance with what our standards are. So they sent an updated draft of their ordinance, which then included the bluff language changes. So there's quite a long amendment section reading here, but we now find that their stormwater standard section and their bluff standard section now is in compliance with WMO standards, is equivalent, and will be just as protective as our standards are. So we are seeking a recommendation for a conditional approval of the City of Jordan's proposed amendments to their ordinance, and I'm going to read this for the record, to their ordinance 2022-01, amending sections 153.11 capital K 2 lowercase d 4, section 154.334 capital C1, and section 154.35, capital C12 and 13 of Jordan City Code for their stormwater requirements and bluff setback, conditional upon the city adopting those revisions to those sections to their city code at their February 28th city council meeting. When I had contacted the city, they had already brought a first reading on February 14th about these changes. And then they said that they were planning on bringing the second reading or the final adoption to the February 28th council meeting, which is today. So again, staff is seeking a recommendation for conditional approval of those sections, conditional upon the city adopting those amendments to those particular sections. And I'll stand for any questions.
Do we recommend conditional approval for the board to have approval or conditional approval, or does the city just need our conditional approval?
It's actually, I wrote it on the RBA as a conditional, the board giving them a conditional approval conditioned upon the city adopting those
Okay.
amendments.
Questions for Melissa before we have a motion?
Madam Commissioner, this is Commissioner Pint. No, I have no questions. It's just that I know this was a very, very hot topic when we adopted these initial rules, and we felt very strongly about the setback at that time. So I'm glad to see that the city of Jordan now is going to go along with that setback. So with that understanding, I would recommend that we make a motion to recommend to the board to approve Jordan's ordinances as if with the condition that they make the changes as we requested today.
Do we have a second?
This is Commissioner Casilius. I'll second that motion.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Weaver,
Aye.
Commissioner Pint,
Aye.
Commissioner Casilius,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Aye.
and Commissioner Veerling.
Aye.
Okay, that motion is passed. Next up, looks like we just needed a motion to adjourn the meeting tonight.
Commissioner Schmidt, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And do we have a second?
So Commissioner Casilius, I'll second the motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
And call the roll.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Weaver,
Aye.
Commissioner Pint,
Aye.
Commissioner Casilius,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Aye.
and Commissioner Veerling.
Aye.
All right, that motion is passed. We will adjourn the meeting and we will see everyone next month. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Commissioners.
Great. Thank
Thank
you.
you.